and some other things. I also do transactional matters, things like business formation, acquisition and sale, real estate contracting and settlements, estate planning, all those exciting things. Those are types of cases that don't typically end up in court, but a lot of the civil cases that come before the court start with those types of transactions. This is an unprecedented election for Adams County as we choose two new judges to replace two of our 4 judges who are retiring. 2 people elected will likely serve on the court for decades to come. Adams County voters should go to the polls with an understanding of the important job our judges do, what type of cases that they oversee, hear, and decide, and what these cases entail on a day-to-day, week-to-week, and month-to-month basis. I hope we'll have an opportunity to talk about that a little bit tonight. Voters should also get to know the candidates, which is why we're here tonight. We'll all get an opportunity to talk a little bit about ourselves and our thoughts on various issues. Voters should consider each candidate's professional experience and competence, their personal and professional integrity, and whether he or she has a judicial temperament. But Adams County voters are lucky. You have 3 great choices. I have utmost respect for Sean and Christy, who I've enjoyed seeing on the campaign trail, and I've enjoyed getting to know professionally over the years. I'm glad to have the opportunity to be here tonight to speak with you, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Teeter. Mr. Wagner, your opening statement, please.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Sean Wagner. I am the district attorney here in Adams County. I've been the district attorney for the last 12 years. And I've been a practicing attorney for 28 years. During that 28 years, my entire career, I've been a prosecutor. I think I possess the necessary skills that will make a quality judge here in Adams County. The first thing you have to look at is trial experience, courtroom experience. Because for lawyers, the courtroom is our office. Just as for judges, the courtroom is the judge's office. I have logged thousands of hours in courtrooms here in Adams County and in other counties throughout Pennsylvania. I have tried hundreds of cases in my career and have tried over 150 jury trials in my career. Some of those trials took weeks at a time. I think that's the one factor you want to look at is when you're looking at the candidates, what trial experience do they have? What have they done in the courtroom? And not so much the cases they've handled, but the quality of the cases and what have they done when they've been in the courtroom. Second, as district attorney, I had the leadership skills necessary to make tough decisions. When you think about it, when you break it down to its simplest terms, that's what judges do. They make decisions. And a lot of times they have to make very tough decisions. And one of the things I think voters are going to have to look at is to say, what is in the candidate's background, what is in the candidate's experience from that you can determine whether they can make a tough decision. As the district attorney the last 12 years, I'm the chief law enforcement officer in the county. And as the chief law enforcement officer, I've had to make some extremely tough decisions. Finally, I have the necessary life experiences at this point in my career. My beautiful wife, lovely wife Jennifer is here. We've been married 17 years. 2 of my 3 sons, Connor and Ethan, are here. Connor's 13, Ethan is 11, my 9-year-old's at a baseball game. And at this point, I'm 53 years old. I can tell you dealing with my 3 boys on a daily basis has prepared me for any challenge which I think the judgeship would offer. But I think all of these factors have converged at the right time for me in my career, and I look forward to talking more about some of these factors. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Simpson, your opening statement, please.
Thank you. Am I on here? Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming out. I'd like to thank the folks here at Cross Keys Brethren Home community, and thanks to all of you for coming out and being so interested in this judicial race. I agree with a lot of what Sean and Matt have said. We are colleagues, and it's been a very pleasant and cordial race. We are all members of the Adams County Bar Association. We occasionally have dealings with each other, so I'm pleased that we can be so cordial. I grew up here in Adams County in Strabane Township, where I live. I live with my husband, Phil Trosel, who's here, and our son, Jacob, who's 11. I'm 44 years old. I get a lot questioned a lot about my age on the campaign trail, which I take as a compliment. I appreciate that, but I've never had it be a detriment before. It's been interesting. But anyway, I'm 44. I've been practicing law in Adams County for 18 years. And I started out my career as a prosecutor in the DA's office. When Michael George was district attorney, he hired me when I graduated from law school. I've prosecuted hundreds of criminal cases. I served in that office from 1997 until 2001. I primarily focused on crimes of violence committed against women and children because part of my salary was funded through a grant from the Violence Against Women Act. I then went into private practice. We started our family, and in my private practice, I've litigated cases in every branch of the Court of Common Pleas, the Orphans Court, Juvenile Court, Criminal Court, as I mentioned, Civil Court, and Family Court. I think that experience has helped give me the broad and diverse background necessary to serve as a judge of the Court of Common Pleas. I currently serve as a divorce master, where I hear cases. I'm appointed by Judge Bigham to do that. I hear divorce cases and resolve them and do some of the things that judges do. I'm also appointed as an arbitrator from time to time. And I also represent children occasionally in high conflict custody situations. I'm also a mediator. I do a lot of family law practice family law mediation in my practice. I have my own law firm, which I've had for since 2011, and prior to that I worked for Gates & Gates Law Firm. So I'm looking forward to the rest of this evening and hoping to give you the information that you need to make an informed decision when you vote, and I thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you very much. The one thing I did forget to mention is there's being index cards being passed around. If we have time at the end, we'll take some questions from the audience that will be brought up here, so to fill them out on the index cards. Okay, we'll move on to the first round of questions. As I said, all of these questions are, none of the candidates have seen the questions beforehand, so it's completely off the cuff as far as them hearing the questions. The first question, we'll start with Mr. Wagner. What could be done to best assure a positive direction for youth in the judicial system?
Can you repeat it one more time?
Yes. What could be done to best assure a positive direction for youth in the judicial system?
I think it's an excellent question, and I can tell you as district attorney, my focus has obviously been the safety in the community. We need to feel safe in our own homes, and most importantly, children need to feel safe in schools themselves. And as district attorney, we've done a lot to try and deal with not only issues in schools with bullying and school violence, but most importantly, we've also done a lot to try and encourage children to not break the law, and encourage children to stay on the right side of the law. And the court system has done a great job with that, and the district attorney's office has been part of a lot of those programs. Personally, I spend a lot of time speaking in our schools, both in the elementary, middle, and high schools, dealing with school bullying, dealing with issues with texting, and dealing with issues we've had recently, dealing with bomb threats. I think the first key is education. We need to make sure that our children are educated on issues that could really impact them. And what I'm talking about primarily is drug and alcohol issues. I can tell you in my experience as district attorney, when I've seen issues or concerns with juveniles, a lot of times those issues deal with drug and alcohol. And so I know the court, through the juvenile system, really takes a close look at this issue. Our juvenile system is not designed to punish. Rather, our juvenile system is designed to rehabilitate and to make the child, to make sure that the child doesn't reoffend and come back into the juvenile system itself. My office prosecutes every juvenile case in Adams County. The district attorney's office handles all of those. And throughout my 28 career as a prosecutor, I've handled numerous juvenile cases. And the key, I think, from our perspective is we want to provide the tools to the children so that we don't see them in our court system as adults. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Simpson, your answer to that question, please.
I agree with many of the points that Sean has made. I see things, because my recent practice has been more in the family law and dependency court arenas, I see it from that side. In dependency court, we deal with children who are at risk, who may be neglected or abused. And the question of permanency, providing a child with permanency, is so important when a child is in foster care. Our county has been a leader, and Judge Kuhn in particular has been a leader in changing and in improving permanency for children, which I think is at the root of helping at-risk children to have stability in their lives, to be placed with perhaps a kinship family member who can support them if their own parents are not able to take care of them, and providing them with a place where they feel they belong and they can develop the self-esteem that they need because they belong to a family. How that family is defined might be different than how you and I may define it, but as part of they are part of something, they are part of a family, and they feel that they belong. So I think that's really important in that angle. And also in dealing with child custody cases. As I said, I represent a lot of children who are kind of caught in the middle between family members who want to be with them. They love them, and sometimes they don't always see the bigger picture that children need to be protected and children need to be prioritized over the angst that the parents may be feeling for a variety of reasons. And one of the things I've had the privilege to do is to be the voice for those children, to be able to go to court with a child and say, Judge, this is, how this child feels, or to be able to enable the child to talk to the judge and tell the judge how he or she feels about the situation in the family and how it affects them and what they want, and to try to bring a peaceful resolution and a positive resolution moving forward. And that's where I think my mediation skills come into play, because I handle those types of situations a lot with families in my private practice, where they try to create peaceful solutions for those families who may be breaking up or redefining themselves. And that's always been a privilege to be able to do that. And I think if there's a way of enabling those peaceful solutions, it helps children to feel better about themselves and move forward with plenty of support. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Finally, Mr. Teeter.
Like Christy, my experience has been with children in the judicial system has been in juvenile cases, custody cases, family law cases. I'm currently the Assistant Solicitor for Children and Youth Services, and have enjoyed stepping into that role and representing that agency as it tries to help families who are going through tough times and to help children who are in often just terrible situations. One of the things that the court can continue to do, and I think in Adams County, like Christy mentioned, we've made great progress on finding permanency for children who are in the system more quickly. Oftentimes those cases can languish for years, where a child goes from foster home to foster home. And when it becomes apparent that the parents of those children will not be able to resume custody of the children, it's time to move on and find other permanency, whether that's with a kinship provider or whether that's terminating parental rights and moving on to the adoption stage, so that child can find some resolution, some finality, and know where they're going to be. One of the challenges with doing termination of parental rights and adoptions in that context is oftentimes parents get to the point where they realize they can't take care of the children anymore, but they have a relationship with them and want to remain in touch. And we're finding increasingly, the research is showing that that's good for the child. They might not be able to live with their parents, but they should maintain that connection. And we're moving towards, in this state, having what's known as open adoptions. But the system we have right now is not perfect. You can enter into agreements for the adoptive parents to allow the biological parents to maintain contact, but there's not really good enforcement mechanisms for it now, and I'd like to see that expanded. On the custody side, every time a custody case ends up in the courtroom, it's a tragedy. It's a tragedy for the family. It's a tragedy for the children. As a judge, we have a judge who discourages contentious custody litigation, and if elected judge, and if I were to handle custody cases, I would want to continue along those lines to resolve custody cases without a lot of conflict.
Thank you very much, Mr. Teeter. I should note that I think that's thunder, not them breathing heavily into their microphones. The next question, we'll start off with Ms. Simpson. Do you believe the composition of juries in Adams County, for the most part, represents the community at large?
That's a very interesting question. I actually had a voter ask me about this the other day because they had been selected in a recent pool of jurors, and they were very surprised that there were no persons of color in the jury pool, and I found that a bit disturbing. And I used to do quite a few jury trials when I was a prosecutor, and I felt then that there was some diversity in the pools, and I think there could be more, frankly. I don't have a solution for that off the top of my head, but it's something that I think should be certainly looked at from time to time, because we certainly, as citizens, want a jury that is comprised of a fair group of residents in our county. So that's really, really important, and as we all know, that's a fundamental tenet of our constitutional rights. So I think that's really important. I think that diversity is always important, and embracing other people's viewpoints and having those voices be heard in our judicial system is really important. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you very much. Mr. Teeter, same question.
No, it's a difficult question to answer, in large part because we don't have a lot of jury trials in Adams County. I focus primarily in the civil area and mostly in the family law area. Family law represents 52%, when you talk divorce, custody, and support cases, represents 52% of the cases filed in Adams County every year. Criminal and civil cases, there are jury trials from time to time. However, in 2013, there were 0 jury trials in Adams County, Pennsylvania. I think there were in civil cases, and there were 5 jury trials in criminal cases that year. So we just don't have a lot. But I would suspect that they're not very representative when they are chosen. Certainly attorneys never get chosen for jury duty, and that's true from what I hear of a lot of professionals who are most likely to have some excuse that allows them to get out of the jury pool. There's always issues, of course, and we don't have a lot of death penalty cases here in Adams County. We have them from time to time, and everybody remembers the recent one. But one of the challenges in those cases is death qualification and being able to get people off the jury who don't feel that there should be a death penalty or feel that it's morally wrong. So in that way, it's not going to be representative of the general population. That's just some information to share about that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wagner.
Well, we do have a number of jury trials in Adams County. I believe we've already had 4 or 5 this year in April. We probably average, on the criminal side, I'd say at least 15 jury trials a year. We have a number of non-jury trials because a lot of times the defendant has a right to decide, do I want to go jury or non-jury. But the bottom line is, when I first started practicing law in 1987, jury pools were determined by voter registration. And with voter registration, that really had an impact on whether it was truly representing all the voters, all of the citizens at large. And that was changed. And now jury pools are based on driver's license registration primarily. So that greatly increased the jury pools in all counties throughout Pennsylvania. I can tell you in my experience, and I tried a number of jury trials in Adams County, I think we have a fair representation of the citizens of Adams County on those juries itself. I can tell you there's something dealing with, if there is a challenge in a jury case, there's something called a Batson challenge, and that's where the defendant, where individuals are intentionally striking jurors based on their race or based on some other defining factors such as your sex or something of that, but primarily race. In Adams County, rarely, if ever, have I seen a Batson challenge. I think that shows that, at least from my office's perspective, we are trying to pick the best jury possible for both the defendant and for the victim. because every time there's a trial, in most cases, there's a victim. And we don't want to lose sight of the fact that that victim has rights also, and that victim should be represented in terms of the jurors that are picked. But I can tell you, in my overall experience, I think the juries that we have in Adams County are very intelligent. They're very thoughtful. I know how hard they work. And I think from what I've seen in my 12 years, the decisions that they're rendering are the correct decisions based on the law. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wagner. Next question, we'll start with Mr. Teeter. If you are elected, what ideas could you offer that would improve the administration of justice here in Adams County?
I think one of the big things that come to mind for me is just the costs to access justice. We're seeing in this county and around the Commonwealth just an increase in fees for every little thing you do in court. I think I feel like in the last 3 years, the fees for civil filings have gone up 3 times. It's gotten to the point where it's not affordable for the common person to access the judicial system. I mean, it costs well over $100 to start a custody case, a divorce case. Every time there's a motion that's filed, if an attorney has a scheduling conflict because they're in a different courtroom, it's a $27.50 fee, which is going to be passed on to clients in some way. I'd like to see our politicians make the difficult choices in how we fund our courts so that we get away from this whole kind of user fee thing. And I don't know what power the judges can bring to bear on that situation. I do know that the president judge has to approve the prothonotari's fees when they're raised, and I assume that's similar with the clerk of court's fees. The other thing I'd like to see as far as the administration of justice is just more availability of records. Researching records, well, this includes electronic records and electronic access to records. I'd like to see us move forward with electronic filing. It would save people money. It would save attorneys time, which will save clients money. And it allows people to find out what's going on in the court just by getting on the computer, registering, and looking at the various filings in the cases. It's very difficult to get records now, to go through and sort through, sit in the prothonotary's office and sort through case records and so forth. I think an open court, including electronic access to the publicly available files, is something that we should strive for, and it's something that should be affordable to people.
Thank you very much, Mr. Teeter. Mr. Wagner. Well,
the good news is, and I'll talk primarily on the criminal side, I think we're doing a tremendous job in terms of how efficiently we are administering justice. I was just looking at statistics from when an individual is arrested to when that individual's case is finished. I believe we are third in the state in terms of the time it takes for the case to go through the system. And that's important. It's important for a number of reasons. Obviously, it's important to the defendant, that the person who's arrested. We need to protect that person's rights. We need to provide the resources that person needs in their case. But that person also wants to see a decision in their case. And it's very important to victims. I worked in many systems before I came to Adams County. I was an assistant district attorney in Philadelphia for 2 years. I worked in the special assault unit. The only cases I handled were felony child abuse and felony domestic violence cases. And I can't tell you how long it took for those cases to go through the system. And ultimately, the victims would have to come back to court time and again and would finally get frustrated and would just drop off, and then the case would have to be dismissed. In Adams County, President Judge George has done a tremendous job of increasing the efficiency with which we move cases through the system. And I think it really helps victims. When I meet with the victim, especially a young victim, a child abuse victim, when we have a child abuse victim and we're trying to say, well, it's going to take, a year from now, well, that child doesn't want to hear that. But if we can ensure that child that, 4 to 6 or 6 to 8 months from now, we know your case is going to, we're going to come to a conclusion on your case, it really helps that victim. Most importantly, it helps the victim's family. The other area where we've done a great job in the administration of justice is the collections of fines and fees. Our clerk of court's office and Judge George have really made this a priority. For those individuals that break the law and are sentenced and have to pay fines and fees, we do a great job of collecting. We have one of the highest collection rates in the state. That's money that can go back into our court system and can fund those other areas of the court system that Matt was just talking about. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And finally, Ms. Simpson.
Piggybacking on what Sean said, also getting restitution for victims, not only collecting those court costs and things, but if you've been the victim of a crime and you're owed restitution, our county has made great strides, again, in collecting those funds or being more aggressive, because our judges are more aggressive in collecting those funds, so victims can get the restitution that has been ordered to be provided to them. Along with that, we have in our county, it's really a pleasure to practice law in this county. I've practiced in York County and Cumberland County a little bit, a lot more in York, and I really have always preferred to be here because our processes are much more streamlined, in my opinion, especially in family court. People get into court. When I file a custody suit, I normally can get a conference within 2 to 3 weeks with the judge, with Judge Bigham, and that is unheard of in other counties. So I think we do a really great job at that. That's something I would wish to continue. I think access is so important because I've practiced in other counties where, you don't get to a custody trial for 9 months to a year, and custody cases, that's a moving target. Things change on a daily basis, monthly basis. It can be a whole different ballgame by the time you get to trial. So those are some things I think we do really well. I think e-filing, as Matt mentioned, is the wave of the future. Lancaster County does it, some other counties. I think that's something that we're going to be looking at. We provide self-help forums. Matt and I both sit on the Family Law Committee, and we have taken great pride. Judge Bigham has really motivated us to create self-help forums, which are available online. So again, people have access to the court system when they don't have attorneys, because let's face it, not everybody can afford to pay me or to pay Matt to go to court with them. It's just the reality of the situation, and Mid-Penn Legal Services is strapped. Their resources are limited. They can't represent everybody in a custody case, even if they're indigent. So again, the e-filing, the access, using DocStar to provide information. The Planetary's office does that now. When I get my divorce master cases, everything's scanned into DocStar and emailed to me. So I no longer have to go to the Planetary's office and check out the file and take it back to my office. It's a much more streamlined way of doing things, and I think there are ways to improve upon that, but I really think we do a good job, and I would just wish to try to improve upon what's already a great foundation.
Thank you. Next question, we'll start with Mr. Wagner. What resources does the court need to better address domestic issues that come before it?
Are you talking domestic violence? When you say domestic issues, I'm sorry, I don't understand.
Yes, domestic violence issues, I'm sorry.
Well, really, where it starts is in the criminal justice system itself, dealing with domestic violence. It's the one area of the law that really you can't put into any category. You can't look at a person's age, or a person's race, or a person's salary, or their income level. Really, domestic violence is pervasive throughout our entire society, and it really hits every class of people, and so it's something that, as district attorney, I have made a priority in terms of how do we investigate domestic violence cases, and then also how do we ensure that we don't see domestic violence cases escalate, or we don't see the defendant come back. The one thing that the court has done is through our probation department is we actually provide counseling to the batterers. And we have a program here in Adams County called the Novus program. And is a program strictly designed to provide treatment to domestic batterers, to try and break the cycle and to try and ensure that we don't see them again, that we don't actually, see them continuing to commit crimes against their spouses. There's a direct connection between domestic violence and child abuse. And Adams County has done a great job in that area. As district attorney, I was one of the founding individuals behind our Children's Advocacy Center. We're one of the smallest counties in the state to have our own Children's Advocacy Center. It's been in existence now for 10 years. And in a lot of domestic violence cases, we're actually seeing the children who are the victims of that violence also. The Children's Advocacy Center provides not only counseling to those children, it provides medical services. It provides an area where those children, where we can deal with the specific issues that face them as a result of being a victim of child abuse or domestic violence itself. And I can tell you that really there's a direct connection between the two. When you're looking at domestic violence, it's really family violence. It impacts the entire family, and both our criminal justice system and the courts have taken a close look at how do we deal with that issue of violence with the entire family.
Thank you very much. Mr. Teeter, same question.
I think a lot of times it's a question of identifying abusive situations, and certainly there's always more training that can be done with our police officers and other first responders to when they arrive at some kind of incident and how they deal with those incidents. Sean mentioned the Novus program, and I recently in a custody case had a client who was in an abusive relationship, and the father in that case had gone through an intensive, it wasn't the Novus program, but it was a batterers intervention program in New Jersey that was fairly intensive and seemed to have positive results. So I'm always wary in those cases that, you know, I feel like if you're abusive to a spouse, you're always going to be abusive to a spouse. But it did improve the situation, and I think funding programs like that to educate batterers and to reform batterers is important to end that cycle. I think it's also important to commit resources and we do, helping victims of domestic violence and to get out of those relationships. I was in a divorce master hearing all day yesterday with a 67-year-old client who was in getting out of a second abusive marriage. And for a long time, there just wasn't those resources there to get people out of those. And I'm seeing a lot of divorces of people later in their life who have stayed in abusive relationships way too long. So really stepping in and committing the resources to helping both the batterer and the victims in those situations and end that cycle of violence is important.
Thank you very much. Ms. Simpson.
Well, anyone who knows me knows that this is an important issue. It's been an important issue for me throughout my career. When I started my career in the DA's office, as I mentioned, I was hired under a grant from the Stop Violence Against Women Act, and part of my job was to prosecute people who were batterers and prosecute people who violated their protection from abuse orders. And one of the things, because it was a new grant for the county, we had different things we had to do. We started a domestic violence task force under then District Attorney, now Judge George's leadership, and he and I together wrote the first protocol in Adams County for consistent investigation and prosecution of those types of crimes, because there was at that time, a lot of misunderstanding and lack of education about the dynamics of domestic violence and a lot of victim blaming. And some of our law enforcement officers needed to be educated on the topic to understand, well, why does she keep going back to him? It's a complicated situation in many ways. And that education was so important, and I'm very proud of that. I went to every police department. I had trainings. I did all kinds of things. And I saw Cindy Keeney here, and she's from Victim Witness, and she and I went all around to different police departments and helped train people to understand that. I also sat on the board of directors of Survivors, which is our shelter in Gettysburg, providing services, shelter and services for victims of domestic violence, and it's a wonderful resource. It is also often strapped. We always need more money and more help, and Mid-Penn Legal Services as well always needs more help in advocating for victims of domestic violence, men and women and children all alike. I'm very familiar with the Novus program. I was on their board of directors for a number of years, and I do think that is the other piece of this. You can help a victim of domestic violence, but you have to address the batterer side of it. Now, sometimes you know, we all know you can't force someone to change if they don't want to change, but we at least have this resource, and the court uses it very effectively to get batterers, to hold them accountable and to maybe change the behavior and break the cycle, which is what we all want as a society, is to break that cycle so we don't see people, the next generation, coming back into court repeating these behaviors.
Thank you. The next question, we'll start with Mr. Teeter. How can a judge help to reduce the rate of recidivism in our county courts?
Well, again, we're getting a lot of questions, I think, that delve into the criminal courts, and I've been pointing out to, and part of my campaign is to educate people about the types of cases our court handles, and criminal cases represent only approximately 20% of the cases handled in the Adams County Court. And to go back to something we talked about earlier about jury trials, the statistics are available on the Pennsylvania Unified Judicial System website as to each county's case statistics, what percentage are divorce custody support, what percentage are criminal, and how many jury trials we have each year in Adams County. We had, as I mentioned, 5 criminal jury trials in 2013. We had 7 in 2012, and we had 13, which is more, but it's certainly not that 15 average that was quoted in 2011. I think a big thing that we could do to prevent recidivism, again, I think if I'm elected, chances are I'm appointed the cases that are currently handled by one of the 2 retiring judges, and that's your family law, your juvenile, your orphans court cases. I find it highly unlikely, based on my experience as attorney, that I will step into the role of handling criminal cases which are currently handled by the judges who are not retiring. But we need a VA court, we need a drug court, we need to stop housing our mentally ill and our drug and alcohol addicts in the Adams County Prison. I think that's the biggest thing we can do to reduce recidivism. There is a drug court and VA court in York County. I think from what I've heard, it's made great strides in reducing recidivism. I think ultimately we need to, and it's a political question, unfortunately, but I think the judges can encourage it. We need to fund these courts to deal with these issues and take the long-term view on it. Yes, there may be an expense to getting something like that started, but how much does it cost to repeatedly house a mentally ill or a person or a drug addict in the Adams County Prison? It's just not an effective way or effective use of our tax dollars.
Thank you very much, Ms. Simpson.
Recidivism has always been something that's concerned me. I used to handle a lot of parole and probation and intermediate punishment program revocations in the DA when I worked in the DA's office. So it's something that's always, especially when I would see someone come back into court again and again for violating their probation or parole, and you just kind of scratch your head and say, well, you know, how do we stop this? How do we change it? And again, if an individual doesn't want to change, then it's hard, but I think we need to give them the tools and the opportunities to make those changes. And I think a holistic approach is really important in that regard, really being interested as a judge and finding out what is going on in this person's life. You know, not just reading the sheet in front of you that says, well, they were out drinking alcohol at a bar when they weren't supposed to, or they violated their curfew. You know, those things are important, but what's really going on behind that? And I think a good judge is going to inquire about those things to each individual person and try to figure out and utilizing the probation personnel and the people who work with that individual. What's really going on here? How can we address this? What resources are available to give this person the opportunity to make the changes that he or she needs to make to break the cycle of recidivism? And I think a holistic approach is really important, because any time an individual is incarcerated, it has a ripple effect through their family and our community, and obviously costs us money as taxpayers. The mental health aspect of an individual situation is really important as well. I think we could probably do a better job at dealing with that. One of the things I'm encouraged by is that our As many of you know from reading in the paper and hearing things that the court and the county are talking about building a new human services building. I'm not privy to any of that information. I'm like you, I read about it in the paper. But one of the components of that that's being proposed is having on-site mental health advocates and treatment providers there, which I think would be a good thing, again, for that holistic approach, along with drug and alcohol services. I do some work for Cornerstone Counseling, so I'm very aware of the resources that are available through that organization and other organizations. And I think there's always room for improvement, but the holistic approach to each and every individual, I think, is the important approach.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wagner. Same question.
Well, let's deal with that first issue of the fact that 20% of the cases in Adams, only 20% of the cases we handle are criminal cases. That's talking about adult misdemeanor and felony cases. The District Attorney's Office handles all criminal cases in Adams County. Last year, we handled 3,067 cases, and that is much greater than 50% of the cases that were filed in Adams County when you look at criminal and civil. And you have to be careful when you hear about statistics. There's a big difference between a case that is filed and a case that actually goes to court. In a number of civil filings, a judge never even sees those cases. And when you start looking at statistics, and you're looking at statistics such as support court, where people have to pay child support, the District Attorney's Office actually handles all those cases that go to court. They are contempt matters. So I want to be clear that more than 50% of the cases that go to court in Adams County and are handled directly by our judges are criminal cases. And we have the statistics to back that up. In regards to recidivism, our judges have really taken a close look at this in the last several years, and the District Attorney's Office has worked very closely with them. And there are a number of things we're looking at. In regards to mental health, we created, and this was a grant that was obtained through the Criminal Justice Advisory Board. We started a mental health partnership where both the district attorney, the defense attorney, and the court and probation work together. Those individuals that have serious mental health issues and shouldn't be in prison, we try to find them adequate housing, and we try to put them in a controlled environment where we can deal with their mental health issues. In regards to drug and alcohol, I can tell you that's the biggest issue we see with recidivism is drug and alcohol by far. Our courts have changed the way that they handle probation cases. Every probation case now where there's a drug and alcohol issue, there is a very detailed drug and alcohol evaluation, and there is a program as part of their probation to provide the services necessary. Most importantly, the Adams County Prison, through the Adams County Prison Board, of which I'm a member, are in the process of hiring a drug and alcohol treatment specialist who will work in the prison itself. We will be the first county prison in Pennsylvania which will have a drug and alcohol treatment specialist inside the prison that will start that drug and alcohol treatment while that individual is still in prison, and most importantly, will then make sure that they can set up the gateway to have the resources necessary when they leave prison.
Thank you. Okay, we'll take a couple questions that were submitted by our audience members. The first one has to do with experience, and we'll start off with Mr. Wagner. Have you ever provided or taught continuing legal education courses to other attorneys?
By continuing legal education courses, what we're referring to is, in Pennsylvania, every attorney has to undergo a certain number of hours. I think it's 14 hours of legal education a year. And those courses are taught by other attorneys, normally attorneys who are specialists in that area, in that field. And I can tell you in my role as a prosecutor, over the years I have taught numerous classes dealing with continuing legal education. And it's primarily in the criminal justice system. But I think that's important because it goes to the issue of knowledge, legal knowledge. Because that's one of the factors we need to look at when we're determining, who will make the best judges. I think I probably 60 to 80 times have taught other attorneys areas of the law. and I am very involved with the Pennsylvania District Attorneys Association. I'm currently the president of the District Attorneys Institute, which is a training arm of the DA's Association. But I've also provided training to the National District Attorneys Association, to the Pennsylvania Bar Institute, to the National Coroners Association. It's a very important role that I feel attorneys should play, especially when you're looking at younger attorneys. As district attorney, I have always made an effort to ensure that my attorneys are getting the proper training. More importantly, through the DA's Association, we want to provide proper training to young attorneys, and that's why, given my vast experience, I will routinely be involved in training and teaching of young attorneys. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wagner. Ms. Simpson.
I have some limited experience in teaching CLE courses. I taught a course regarding parental kidnapping back in the early 2000s, I believe, for the Pennsylvania Coalition Against Domestic Violence, and it was a CLE course in Harrisburg. And I taught a segment on civil procedure in Adams County several years ago for the Pennsylvania Bar Institute. And I also taught a CLE locally to our Bar Association regarding family group decision making, which is it's sort of a hybrid of mediation. We use it quite a bit in dependency court. It also has applications in family court where people who are in a dispute and usually in a family type of dispute come together and try to resolve those issues, and they utilize all of the people who are involved in their situation, maybe their minister, grandparents, other family members, community members, neighbors, sometimes as is applicable to the situation, and that's all done through a facilitator. So that was another CLE that I presented to our local bar with some of the family group decision-making folks, and I was proud to do that. I'm always interested in alternative dispute resolution, and that's a really great avenue along with mediation, which I'm obviously a big fan of. So.
Thank you very much, Mr. Teeter.
I have not taught any CLE courses. I'm in the process right now. I'm involved with the Adams County Children's Roundtable, and there's a group of us that are working on putting together a mini-summit, which it may or may not include continuing legal education credits for attorneys that attend, but it is to educate the community about the various services that are available to help families and children in our community, and that would include, we're envisioning having almost a banquet where there's a variety of different service providers giving different courses on what they do and different issues that those service providers are dealing with, and that would include a component, hopefully, that will get a lot of the attorneys to who deal with those issues in our Adams County Court. It's not other attorneys, but I've gone out to various school districts and give talks to seniors before they graduate on how their life changes as they become an adult. I've also gone into the Gettysburg Middle School and given a talk on to a English class on persuasive writing. And I've dedicated more of my time to, at this point in my career, to helping local Adams County residents better access the court. As Christy mentioned, we're members of the Family Law Committee. I was on that committee when it was formed. Judge Bigham and worked hard on putting together the forms, which I think are the best in the state. We have statewide forms at this point, but Adams County's forms were among the first. It was surprising for a small county, but they're still the best out there, I think, because of all the hard work we put in. If elected judge, I would certainly hope that I'd have the opportunity to do more teaching in this community and around the state, and get involved in the various committees that judges are often afforded the opportunity to get involved in. I know Judge Bigham currently teaches as an adjunct professor in several local colleges or law schools, and that's something I'd like to do someday. Even though I don't teach it, I think I have a very detailed knowledge of divorce, custody, juvenile, and support cases, and it's something that I will teach in my career. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Another question from the audience. You obviously all know and very much respect each other. Consequently, you appear to agree on most topics. Are there issues on which you disagree with one or both of your co-candidates? And we'll start off with Ms. Simpson.
Wow, that's an interesting question. I'm sure there are issues we disagree on. I can't think of something right off the top of my head. You know, I have, Matt and I, we've been adversaries in cases. We've had divorce cases where we represent the spouses, but we always, it's a collegial type of thing. We know that we have a job to do. We advocate for our clients, and I think we both do it well. And conversely, I haven't done much criminal defense in my career, but I've had a few cases now and then with Sean's office. And again, you know, it's just you do your job. And on fundamental issues, I can't think of anything that I disagree with Sean or Matt on in particular. I think we're all very thrilled and pleased and privileged to be attorneys in Adams County, and I think we all three love practicing law here, and we all have our thing that we do. And one of the greatest things about practicing law here in Adams County is the collegiality and the fact that, you know, we may not always see eye to eye on things, but we do maintain that collegial relationship, and we leave our business in the courtroom, and outside the courtroom we can be amicable with each other. And I think that's one of the greatest things about being here and practicing law here.
Thank you very much, Mr. Teeter.
Well, I agree with Christy. I mean, I think we're lucky in this county because we have a very, very small and collegial bar. We all know each other well. We may not all socialize together, but we do at times. We have bar association functions and so forth that we go to. It's not going to do our clients or people we represent any good if we all act like a bunch of raging jerks to each other. It's just going to cost them more money. I pride myself in being a practical person, trying to lower the temperature and get things resolved in a practical manner. Also, people have to understand that attorneys have a job to do. In the courtroom, or writing correspondence or filing pleadings, you know, we have to be zealous advocates for our clients, but we don't have to make it personal. I could go to a tough custody hearing where I'm disagreeing strongly with another attorney and then go out and have a beer with that attorney that night. I mean, it's not supposed to be a personal thing, and if as an attorney you make it a personal thing, as I said, you're just going to waste a bunch of your client's money squabbling. And I've gotten those cases from attorneys who can't separate the personal, and it's a mess. I got one early in my career, divorce, where two attorneys were writing the most unprofessional letters back and forth, and they made it personal, and I just had to wonder what that client spent to engage in all that nonsense. I'm sure there are issues that we disagree with. I think we've identified one. You know, I think Sean and I have fundamental differences about what importance trial experience has. I mean, I have courtroom experience. I think I have as much as anybody in the types of cases that are handled by the two retiring judges. I think what makes a good judge has nothing to do with what makes them a good trial attorney. Being persuasive in your presentation to a judge or a jury, when you think about it, has very little to do with the job of a judge who sits on the bench and has to run a fair proceeding for two litigants, has to isn't trying to persuade anybody. Is just there to make the tough decision at the end of the day. And I'm out of time, so thanks.
Thank you very much. And finally, with that question, Mr. Wagner.
I do agree with Matt and Christy that we're very fortunate in Adams County. We have a very professional bar. I've worked in other counties throughout my career, and I can tell you I've worked in places where it is confrontational, both inside the courtroom and outside the courtroom. That's one of the reasons why I love practicing here in Adams County. It's one of the reasons why I've loved being district attorney in Adams County. I've had some horrific, horrible cases with defense attorneys in Adams County. We're always professional, and most importantly, we're always ethical. And that's the entire bar. And that's a credit to our judges who I think dictate that, and most importantly, it's a credit to all the lawyers. We do have a job to do, and it's a very important job. But it doesn't mean that you have to treat the person on the other side with disrespect. It doesn't mean you have to treat the clients or the individuals that you may be, the criminal defendants, with disrespect. And it starts from our judges, and it obviously goes down to all of our attorneys. in regards to the issue of trial experience, really, I think what it comes down to is what knowledge do you have? Like, what have you done in the courtroom? What have you done in, what have you brought inside the courtroom itself? You can't replace experience. And I've been doing this 28 years, and it's no disrespect to anybody else, but for those 28 years, I tried hundreds of cases. And it's not so much that I've tried, it may not all be trials, but I've been in the courtroom for thousands of hours. You can't teach that. When you're in the middle of a trial, and trust me, I've had some huge trials, trials that are 2 or 3 weeks long. Judges have to make decisions like that. They have to make split-second decisions that can impact whether evidence comes in or evidence goes out. Those decisions can greatly influence the outcome of the case. And if the judge makes the wrong decision, down the road on appeal, that case could get thrown out after you've gone through using, thousands of dollars of resources and all the resources that go into a trial. That's what I'm talking about when I talk about the experience in the courtroom. You can't teach that. The only way to learn that is through doing it, and I think that's, where I would disagree with Matt.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wagner. And we are at the final question before we move on to closing statements. And we'll start this off with Mr. Teeter. What skill sets do you possess that would enable you to be a successful common pleas judge here in Adams County?
Well, let me start with, in this county, because we are so small and it can't truly be done anonymously without hard feelings, we don't rate our judicial candidates. We're a small bar association, and I think I have 2 family members who practice law, which would, just those 2 would probably taint the pool of people answering a questionnaire about the qualifications. But when you look at other counties who do it, it's larger counties. Our neighboring county, York County, does rate their judicial candidates. And they talk about competence, judicial temperament, and integrity. Competence means knowledge in areas of the law, knowledge about evidentiary issues, which Sean is right, but those evidentiary issues are the same in many ways in the ones that actually get into a trial. I mean, a lot of evidentiary issues are done in pretrial motions, are things like hearsay objections. And then those rules of evidence are the same in criminal court as they are in family court, as they are in civil court and juvenile court. So knowledge of those things, analytical ability. I think I have as much knowledge or more than any other candidate in the types of cases that are handled by the 2 retiring judges. And I think that is relevant in this election. It's not to say that there should be any litmus test as to he or she practiced this type of law, they shouldn't be a judge, or anything like that. The other thing is my temperament. I've had people come up to me or talk to my dad or my uncle throughout my career about my temperament. I'm a fairly even-tempered person. I'm a fair person. The York County questionnaire talks about judicial temperament in terms of compassion, decisiveness, open-mindedness, sensitivity, courtesy, patience, freedom from bias, and commitment to justice. I think I have all of those qualities. I think anybody that knows me knows that I'm a fair person. I'm an even-tempered person. I want to hear all sides of every issue. And I can be decisive if I need to. I'm there and ready to make a decision and make the decision that needs to be made after I've heard both sides. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Teeter. Mr. Wagner.
Well, I think, again, what skill sets do you possess that would make you a good judge? It really was some of the things I talked about at the outset of tonight. We've talked a lot about experience. I don't think we need to go into that anymore. But decision-making is one. What decisions have you made in your life? Because really, we're looking to judges to make tough decisions. As district attorney, I'm different than other lawyers. Lawyers represent clients. They provide advice to clients, but ultimately the client makes the decision. As the chief law enforcement officer in the county, as district attorney, I get to make decisions. And there are a number of areas where those decisions are powerful. Because the decisions that my office makes, ultimately the decisions that I make, can affect an individual's liberty, can have the impact of putting that person in prison, separating from his family, and the ultimate decision we have in the law to seek the death penalty. Those are tough decisions. And over the last 12 years, I've made those decisions on a daily basis. And I've used one tenet when I make those decisions: do the right thing for the right reason. I was taught that early in my career by my first boss, and that's what I teach all of my assistant district attorneys, many of who are here tonight. Do the right thing for the right reason. And I've made some decisions that were unpopular. I've made decisions that victims didn't like, or families didn't like, or the community didn't like. But every decision I've made, it's always been the right thing for the right reason. And I think that's what I'm going to bring, if I'm fortunate enough to be elected a judge, I will bring that to the judgeship. In regards to judicial temperament, and it really goes back to what we were just talking about, which is it starts with ethics. You know, you got to do the right thing. Compassion. You know, when I'm dealing with victims and when I'm dealing with defendants. There's cases where I've had compassion for defendants, where maybe the person should have gone to jail, but the right thing was to not send the person to jail, but let's put him in a situation where we can deal with his issues. And truly a commitment to justice. You know, I understand, as district attorney, the authority I have, and I always try to teach my young assistant DAs, we have to be careful to never abuse that and to always use that for the right purposes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wagner. Ms. Simpson.
As far as skill sets, I think I have a broad range of experience that is my overarching theme here. In the civil courts, I've had experience in numerous types of civil cases. Criminal court, as I've discussed, I've been a prosecutor. I know what it's like to hold the hand of a rape victim when she's telling me the agonizing and horrific details of what happened to her, and trying to figure out how we're going to move forward with the case, and does she want to move forward with the case, and have to talk about these things in court. Really hard things. In orphans court, I've dealt with termination of parental rights issues where people had their rights terminated as parents, and also guardianships where I've had senior citizens as clients who may be experiencing some dementia or some other issue where they can no longer take care of themselves, their finances, and someone needs to be appointed to do that for them, and I am their advocate and I am their voice. Family court, as I've mentioned, as a divorce master, I do some of the things that judges do. I am decisive. I make recommendations in cases after I hold a hearing and take testimony and receive evidence. Juvenile court, dependency court, and the criminal side as well. I've had experience with that. I think my experiences and training as a mediator, again, overarches that, helps me to be help me to be a better judge and more insightful in my decision making and more inquisitive. One of the things that our court did several years ago is a self-initiated business process review, and I was a small part of that. And one of the things that came out of that was that cross-training is really important throughout all the judicial offices, and knowing how to do someone else's job. And I think for a judge in our county, since we only have 4 judges, I think that's important, because if someone is ill or unavailable, then you should be able to be a team player and fill in for that person. And I feel that I can do that, regardless of which area or division of the court I would be called upon to serve. And also, just quickly, the temperament issue, I think my clients would tell you that it's about them and not about me. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. We will now move on to closing remarks, as I said earlier, in the reverse order of which we had our opening remarks. So, Ms. Simpson, you are up again. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. Thank you again. Thank you again for your attentiveness. I really appreciate your consideration in coming out here to be informed, and I hope now that you feel that you can make an informed decision when you go to the polls on May 19th. Again, I have 18 years of experience in the divisions of our Court of Common Pleas. I am very passionate about serving our community. I would like the opportunity to make those fair and impartial decisions for litigants and help them resolve their issues in again, a fair and impartial way, with compassion, with attentiveness, and in a dignified and respectful way, and making sure that we enable access to everyone who comes into our courtrooms. And those things are important to me. If I try to put myself into other people's shoes, and if I had a grievance with someone, or I had filed a lawsuit, or I had a custody case or something like that, how would I wish to be treated? And that's the fundamental tenet of how I operate in my practice, how I serve my clientele, as I try very hard to think about how would I wish to be treated. And as a judge, I hope that I would treat people the way I myself would wish to be treated, with respect, with dignity, giving them the full measure of my attention and my skills, and serve them well. So I thank you again for your attentiveness, and I appreciate your consideration, and I hope you all have a good evening.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wagner.
I'd like to thank everybody for coming out tonight. I'd like to thank our hosts, Gettysburg Times, and this wonderful facility we're here in. This was great. I think we really we got to hear some very different ideas, but I think it's important to have a public discussion such as this. I bring a unique skill set to the table here. I've been doing this 28 years. And I've seen some of the most horrific cases that an attorney can see during that 28 years. I've been in the courtroom for thousands of hours, and there's nothing I haven't seen in the courtroom itself. I bring an experience which is necessary in today's society, because unfortunately we are dealing with different issues than we were 10, 12, 15, 20 years ago. As district attorney, I've had to make extremely difficult decisions. Just this week, I'd like to point to two matters which were both on the front page of the paper. On Monday, a petition for certiorari to the United States Supreme Court was filed in the case of Commonwealth versus Christopher Johnson, which was the first death penalty case we've had in Adams County in 50 years. I was the prosecutor on that case. That was a difficult decision, where a law enforcement officer was intentionally shot and killed in the line of duty. That's the type of decisions I've had to make. It may not, all the decisions I make aren't popular, but they're the right decisions. And then just yesterday, I made a decision that a sergeant with the Pennsylvania State Police was justified when he shot and killed an armed gunman who appeared at the Adams County Prison on April 9th. And I think it's important to talk about those two things, because it really highlights the fact that our society is changing, especially when we see what's happened just an hour south of us here in Baltimore itself. Society is changing. We have difficult decisions. We have two judges retiring who have over 50 years of experience. We also have the real possibility that Judge George is going to become a Supreme Court justice in January. We need a judge who has the experience, the decision-making ability, and the leadership to deal with these unique and tough issues that society is dealing with today. That's the reason why I've decided to run for judge here in the Court of Common Pleas. I know I have the experience, I know I have the decision-making, and I have the leadership and the skills necessary to bring all those aspects to the court.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Teeter.
Thank you, everybody, for coming out tonight. I think this has been great, and I hope everybody's learned something about the courts and about the candidates tonight. I think it's a shame. I think all three of us feel that this is a very important election, and I think it's a shame that we don't get a larger turnout for something like this, where people get the opportunity to talk to the candidates. I think one of the differences of opinions that's come up today between Sean and me has to do with what is the relevant experience that we should look at when electing our judges. But I want to make clear that I don't think that the fact that Sean is a DA and has experience in criminal law disqualifies him from being a judge. I'm not taking that position. I'm just frustrated as a candidate. So many of the questions I get on a day-to-day basis have to do with parts of the court that I don't do as much work in, which are a relatively small part of the cases that are filed every year. As I said, over 50% are family law cases when you include those support cases. And no, the district attorney is not involved in every time the support case goes to court. There's something called a de novo appeal from the conference. And I do those all the time. Those go up before Judge Bigham, where you argue that the conference officer made an incorrect decision. I just think it's important for the courts to understand also that there's so much work that a judge does behind the scene that has nothing to do with the courtroom. And I have a ton of courtroom experience in family law cases, in juvenile cases. I'm in court every week. In civil court, I had some statistics that everybody feels are very interesting. In 2011, there were 5 total trials in civil court in Adams County, 3 jury, 2 bench. 2012, 4 jury trials, 4 bench trials. In 2013, 0 jury trials, 2 bench trials. Judges do so much more than what you see on TV presiding over a case. They're behind the scenes making day-to-day decisions, ruling on motions, dealing with attorneys, and trying to resolve cases in a fair and expeditious manner. And I think that's something that you have to have knowledge of as you go to the polls, that's what our courts and our judges do.
Thank you very much, Mr. Teeter. I would like to thank all the candidates for taking the time to share their views with the voters this evening in a very respectful manner. And also thank you to Cross Keys Village, the Brethren Home community, for providing the space for tonight's debate, and also to the Cross Keys residents and the Farm Bureau for helping to organize tonight's debate. I close all of these debates by reminding people that telling them to go to the polls on May 19th is pointless. If you didn't plan to vote, you won't be here today or watching online or in your rooms here at Cross Keys. What I would like you to do is invite at least 2 people, I don't care what their political views are, to go to the polls with you. It's no surprise that the turnout numbers, not only here in this county, this state, but this country, they suck. So let's try to turn that around a little bit. We have a few weeks to the election, so take time to get to know every single candidate on your ballot, not just the judges, but we have the county commissioners and so many different municipal, school board, county row offices, etc. People are invited to write a letter to the editor of the Gettysburg Times in support of their candidate of choice. All letters must be 400 words or less and emailed to editor@gettysburgtimes.com no later than May 6th. May 6th, they're done. And the Gettysburg Times will also publish an election guide on May 12th. We haven't done this in very recent history, so we're pretty excited. All candidates for county, municipal, and school board races have been sent a questionnaire to complete. If you are a candidate for any of those races and you've not gotten the questionnaire, I've emailed them, I've snail mailed them, please let me know. I will get one to you. And if any candidate is interested in advertising in the guide, please see publisher Harry Hartman at the conclusion of tonight's event. And remember to read Gettysburg Times for ongoing daily coverage of not only this election, but all things that are going on here in Adams County. And Monday night, here in this room, we'll have the Democratic candidates for County Commissioner at 7:30 p.m. And on Wednesday at the Valentine Hall at the Lutheran Seminary at 7 p.m., we'll have the Gettysburg School Board candidates. So thank you all very much. Thank you very much, man. I appreciate coming.